Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, the Timberwolves fell to the Celtics in another close game on Sunday. They played a million times better than they did last Thursday against Toronto. We'll break down what went well for Minnesota. We'll talk quite a bit about Rob Dillingham's big moment as part of the Timberwolves' double-digit comeback in this game. It's all upcoming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Monday, everybody. Hopefully you had a fantastic weekend. Happy Thanksgiving week here in the U.S. The Timberwolves, on the heels of a miserable loss to the Raptors last Thursday, had a couple of days off and then took on the defending champion, one of the league's best, 2-3 teams in the Boston Celtics in a Sunday matinee. And while they had some pretty bad moments, we're down as many as 19 in this game, they fought back and had a chance to win or tie at the buzzer. And the comeback was great. There's a lot to talk about here that was positive. I actually think the Wolves played pretty well overall. It's just there's not much margin of error against the Boston Celtics. There just isn't. So we'll get into a bunch of that stuff. I want to spend quite a bit of time on Rob Dillingham today as he finally got some real rotation minutes and played well in an extended stint on the floor. So lots to get to on the show. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And a reminder about the Locked On Wolves newsletter. It's one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. You can sign up right now for free at LockedOnDaily.com. Again, that's LockedOnDaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Wolves newsletter. Okay, lots to get to here today. Let's start with the I guess just kind of an overall big picture of the game and how I feel like the Wolves played. And then I want to spend quite a bit of time on Dillingham and the rotation overall. So in general, I thought the Wolves played pretty well. There were some clunky moments early. Obviously, I shouldn't say obviously if you didn't watch the game, but of course, Jaylen Brown had a huge start to this one. Jaylen Brown has been struggling with this three-point shot all season. He struggled from the field, period, all season. And he knocked down, 5 threes, I think, in the first, 6 minutes of the game. And Boston built a multi-possession lead. And then the Wolves kind of, I shouldn't say I don't know that I would say they dominated the second half of the first quarter because it was still a bit clunky for Minnesota. But they outplayed Boston the second half of the first quarter, went on a nice, 9-0 run, something like that, 12-3 run themselves, kind of spanning the end of the first into the second quarter. Boston eventually caught up. The Wolves bench had some struggles in this game. And Nas couldn't score. The Wolves offense with Anthony Edwards off the floor was not great. Julius Randle had some rough possessions mixed in there. And Boston was able to build a bit of a lead themselves and was up by 3 at halftime. And then Boston built their lead in the second half, got all the way to 19 points in the third quarter, and it really felt like things were about to completely spiral out of control. Minnesota pushed back toward the end of the third, and then in the fourth quarter, they got to within 5 points early in the quarter. Boston pushes it back to double digits. Minnesota gets it down to 4, and then the final couple of minutes was actually really strong defense from Minnesota. Boston kind of, they almost panicked a little bit offensively, had some rush possessions, had some tough contested shots that they ended up taking because the Wolves were scrambling and played well defensively. And then Minnesota scored, on their end. They had some strong offensive possessions down the stretch. And ultimately, they had a final possession with 7 seconds left or so, a little less than 7 seconds. Anthony Edwards drove left side of the floor, got baseline, was under the basket. Would have been a really tough kind of angle or taking off point for him to try and score in that situation. But I thought, in hindsight, that it was at least worth a shot for him to get in the air, give himself a chance to try and score or get fouled down 2. Instead, he makes the right basketball play, passes it to McDaniels in the corner, who swings it to Nas. And it was close. I only saw they only showed one maybe 2 replays where you could really tell. I think if Nas had made the shot, it certainly would have been reviewed, and there's a chance the ball was still on his fingertips when he let go of it. But officially, Nas did get a shot off there at the buzzer that just rimmed out. And of course, Nas didn't have a very good shooting day. He's been struggling lately with his offense. But it was ultimately a decent look for the Wolves, generated by Anthony Edwards' penetration, and I was okay with that being how the final possession shook out. Overall for the game, I said this already at the top, the Wolves actually played pretty well. It was those stretches in the middle of the game where they lost focus. They didn't get back defensively a little bit too often, and there were a couple guys who are primary culprits there. Julius Randle's one to call out. I thought he struggled to get back defensively. It's not the first time this year. I thought Rudy competed very hard in this game. There were, for the most part, actually, I thought they did a pretty good job scrambling back. They're just like, there were some of these lapses, like even Nickeil Alexander-Walker had a couple defensive lapses in this game, missed rotations, stuff that like last year they were on a string for the majority of 82 games and into the playoffs. The Wolves defense were on a string. Now it's really hard against Boston, no doubt. And they had really strong stretches. The post Jaylen Brown explosion in the first quarter, when they got back in the game a little bit initially toward the end of the third quarter, and then for most of the fourth quarter, I thought the defense was pretty good. The problem is you can't have these lapses at all against a team like Boston. The Wolves match up well with the Celtics. Remember last year they split 2 games with them, both in overtime. The Wolves won at Target Center in overtime early in the year, and then they lost in overtime to Boston in Boston. I think the Wolves' ability to defend on the perimeter and match up length and athleticism-wise with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum works pretty well, and Gobert can, do what he does against a smaller lineup. And a Boston team with no Kristaps Porzingis is a pretty diminutive type team. Like their only size coming off the bench is Xavier Tillman and Sam Hauser. And Tillman's a relatively limited player. I like him. He's a limited player, a bench player for a reason. And Hauser would rather be on the 3-point line. So, and obviously Al Horford is the starting big, the only starting big for this team, and isn't exactly like a ball hawk on the glass. And at this point in his career, he's not super active down low. So it shouldn't be a surprise that Rudy puts up numbers against a team like this. But Rudy was fantastic. And the Wolves overall took advantage of some of the size mismatches on the floor. The Celtics kept trying to get Rudy into switches on the perimeter, and Rudy was great. Like there was one play where Jason Tatum got to the rim on him. There was at least 2 others where he forced a miss. Drew Holiday tried to score on Rudy a couple of times, couldn't do it. There were a bunch of guys taking step backs against him, which, Luka Doncic did it in the conference finals last year, and everybody wanted to clown Rudy. But like he's making, and Luka likes taking step backs. He's fantastic at taking step back threes. But Rudy's forcing these guys into step back threes because he moves his feet better than they're anticipating. And because of his length, they're not able to just straight shoot over him. And so a step back 3, Luka Doncic is going to make those, 35% of the time off the dribble. It's still a tough shot. Most guys aren't going to make it at that clip. And I thought, Rudy did a really good job on an island in this game, which happened frequently. He didn't get as many chances offensively, other than like the first possession of the game. The Wolves didn't really try and force the ball into him, which is generally good. There was one other play where Ant tried to lob him the ball late in the game. But beside that, like I feel like I can count on one hand the number of times that they actually tried to pass the ball to Rudy in the half court. But he finished with 10 points on 5 shots, 20 rebounds, didn't have any blocks, but I thought he really impacted the game. I bet he had, I don't know, without counting them, I bet he had at least a dozen contests in the paint that ended in misses for Boston. Seriously. There were a ton of shots that just rimmed out because of Gobert's presence and the pressure he puts on guys to try and get off a shot. Or change the angle or there was a quick shot at one point that Drew Holiday made because he had to quick shoot Rudy and it went in. But a lot of times those shots don't work because of Rudy's presence and guys are altering how they would otherwise shoot the basketball. So I thought Rudy was very good, which was sorely needed after, of course, the much talked about display last Thursday in Toronto and also just the overall on-court product and production or lack thereof from Rudy and the Wolves as a whole. This was a nice bounce back. Again, I go back to you go category by category. The Wolves are a +9 on the glass. The Wolves, neither team really turned it over. Minnesota only turned it over 8 times. Boston only turned it over 6 times. The Wolves Boston got up 56 threes in this game. They were 37%. The Wolves got up 41. They were about 37%. They were slightly worse and slightly fewer threes. They got to the line ultimately 6 more times. A lot of that was late in this game. And they were within a 0.5% on, actually, the Wolves were 37 of 88 from the field. Boston was 37 of 87. The difference, 15 more of those shot attempts were threes for Boston. And there's not very many teams that are going to out 3-point attempt Minnesota these days, but Boston's one of them. No obvious, like, when you look at the box score, there's nothing that stands out as, man, the Wolves really got crushed here, right? They won points to the paint because they're much greater size to their lineup than this Boston team. A plus 14 points in the paint. Already mentioned turnovers. I said Boston turned over 6 times. Actually turned over 7 times. So 8 turnovers for Minnesota, 7 for Boston. Points off turnovers. The Wolves actually scored 6 more points off turnovers. Or no, sorry, that's backwards. Boston scored 6 more points than Minnesota off turnovers. Fast break points, Minnesota was only a -4, but I already identified that as one of the areas that was sloppy for Minnesota, who's getting back in transition. And again, it wasn't the full game. It was really only a couple of short-ish stretches. Like, Boston was really hot in the first quarter. Jaylen Brown was specifically, and in the third quarter. Beside that, Minnesota played pretty well. You just can't have too many lapses against Boston. That's the biggest thing. And it's just too bad that it happened right after the Toronto debacle Thursday, and that now the Wolves are 8-8, and they've lost a couple straight on the road. They're 3-6 on the road this season. It just feels bad. But like, this loss in the middle of any other streak of games wouldn't be the end of the world. It's a 1-possession loss. You had a shot to win at the buzzer on the road to the defending champs. Like, if that shot goes down and the Wolves win this game, there's a lot less panic, I think, surrounding where the Wolves are sitting right now. And I'm not trying to paint this as like a moral victory, silver lining, whatever. It just is what it is. Like, in a vacuum, the Wolves played pretty good. They just didn't play quite good enough to beat a championship caliber team. And in the wake of what they did in Toronto, this was a positive step for Minnesota. All right, let's talk about Rob Dillingham next. It's all upcoming. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at Skims. When you're looking for underwear, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. And the main thing, obviously, when it comes to underwear is comfort. Or maybe how it fits. For me, it's comfort, right? You can't have underwear that's tight in the wrong places, or it chafes, or it's not comfortable in certain situations, or with certain, outer whatever you're wearing, over your underwear, right? That's super important. And there's certain kinds of underwear that they just aren't comfortable. Well, I came across Skims and their stretch boxer briefs, especially the stretch 5-inch boxer brief. I like them a little bit longer. They feel a little bit like a workout underwear type thing, but they're more comfortable and they don't ride up, which is great. I finally felt like I found a type of underwear that fits extremely well. It gives you all the movement you need if you're working out, if you're active, walking around during the day, but it doesn't feel like you're wearing gym clothes, right? Which is a big deal. You can shop for Skims at Skims Men's at skims.com/LockedOnNBA. You can let them know that we sent you. After you place your order, just select podcast in the survey and select our show, Locked On Wolves, in the drop-down menu that follows, or Locked On NBA. If you're looking for the perfect gifts for the whole family, they have Skims for everyone. Skims just launched their biggest holiday shop ever, also available at skims.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, let's talk about Rob Dillingham. So, no Mike Conley in this game. I didn't mention that off the top, but Conley did not play. And Thursday in Toronto, as well as the other game this year that Conley did not play in, Chris Finch started Nickeil Alexander-Walker in the backcourt with Anthony Edwards. In this game, he started Dante DiVincenzo, which I actually like that move. And it didn't really work out. Neither of those guys played all that well. But with no Conley, it meant that Rob Dillingham had another opportunity to play. And he got a bit more runway in this game than he did in Toronto. And part of that's because he played really well. Incidentally, Josh Minott got into the game in the first half, played about a minute. It did not go super well for the Wolves. I don't know that any of it was necessarily Josh Minott's fault. It was kind of when the Wolves just fell apart in general, and Minott didn't get to see the floor again. But anyway, so the Wolves played 7 guys, 26 or more minutes. 1 minute for Josh Minott. Rob Dillingham played 16. He squeezed the trigger, got 10 shots off in these 16 minutes, had 14 points on 6 of 10 shooting, 2 of 4 on threes. had 1 assist, only 1 foul, and no turnovers. I thought Rob Dillingham played great. He was a big catalyst for that Timberwolves run in the second half that allowed them to really get back in the game. And a lot of it was it late third, early fourth? Is that kind of, let's see. Yeah, late third. So they're down 16 when Dillingham comes into the game. And I thought he was extremely active defensively. I thought more often than not, he was doing the right thing. He was fighting over screens. There were a couple where he had some miscommunications with coverage and like he had fought through a screen and could have stayed with his own, but there was, am I switching? Am I not switching? And there was just, it felt like lack of communication because, he hadn't played with some of these guys a bunch yet. And not necessarily his fault. I thought the activity level was good. Now, of course, there's a built-in disadvantage when you're as small as Rob Dillingham is. There's less room for error, right? There's less ability to recover because he's 6-ish foot, 160-ish pounds, right? He doesn't have the length of a Nickeil Alexander-Walker or the size of some of the other guys in order to make up for a mistake or a strong screen that's set or whatever, or if he gets held or whatever the case might be. So that's just kind of built in, right? It's like Jordan McLaughlin was always a pretty good defender. He's just too small. Rob Dillingham is quicker than Jordan McLaughlin. He's more athletic than Jordan McLaughlin. I actually think he might be a little bit smaller than Jordan McLaughlin. But you have to make up for it with activity level. And he's young enough, and at this point, enough fresh legs for barely playing in the first 15 games of the season, that like he should be able to inject some juice on that side of the ball. Even if he's not if he's not a great defender, he probably is still a minus defender, but effort level can erase a lot of that. By the way, it's the opposite of D'Angelo Russell, right? I a lot of times when I talk about point guard defense, I go back to D'Lo. D'Lo was a passable defender at times because he's so big and he's a smart player, but the effort level wasn't there. He wouldn't fight to get through screens. He sometimes just wouldn't do the right thing. He would do the point in transition instead of actually guarding somebody. He'd be like, somebody get that guy. If Dillingham's the opposite of that and he gives you effort like a Jordan McLaughlin, I don't know that he'll ever be a plus defender, but he doesn't have to be Lou Williams defensively, right? He could be better than that. Even if he's Lou Williams offensively, I think the defense could be better. Anyway, I thought he played well. As kind of that stretch went along, Dillingham had a few more opportunities here and there. He hit a shot toward the end of the end of the quarter that was big. Wolves were down 11 points going to the fourth quarter, okay? And Dillingham's still on the floor. He hits his first three-pointer, which is obviously huge. Then he hits a layup on the next possession. And then initiated a play where the Wolves ended up scoring on, missed a three-point jumper after an offensive rebound, and then made a great move going to the basket, almost made a crazy reverse layup. Julius Randle gets the offensive rebound. The ball finds Dillingham again, this time in the left corner. He knocks it down to pull the Wolves to within 7. Just an outstanding stretch of play from Rob Dillingham, where he got to the cup a couple of times. He made a couple of three-pointers. One of the ones he missed, by the way, was in and out and easily could have dropped. It was just the juice that he plays with is a different dynamic than anybody on the Wolves. And he's nowhere near the size of Anthony Edwards, but it really is. That first step, that burst is not dissimilar. I think it was the Toronto game where I like glanced away from the screen, looked up, couldn't see the player, but just kind of saw a burst, the ball move, and I was like, and I just, my brain was like, it's Ant. And it wasn't. It was Rob Dillingham. They looked nothing alike. Rob Dillingham's much smaller than Anthony Edwards. But how quickly the ball moved from point A to point B, that's something you can't teach. And Anthony Edwards and Rob Dillingham are the only guys on the Timberwolves that have that. Now, Rob Dillingham's got great natural, like one of the things I loved when the Wolves acquired him on draft night, you can go back and listen to what I said at the time. His ability to put touch on the ball, to put spin on the ball around the rim, like the finishing ability. He's not Kyrie Irving, but it's that type of finishing ability that a lot of guys don't have. And Anthony Edwards, frankly, does not have the natural finishing ability at the rim because he's so athletic and so powerful. He does well for himself, and the left hands continue to get better at the rim. But Rob Dillingham, I'm sure, for his whole life, has had to be creative. Because even in college, I'm sure even in high school, depending on where he went and who he played with, who he played against, he's always had a big size disadvantage. So he's had to be crafty. He's had to be a bit think outside the box a little bit around the rim, putting spin on the ball, etc. And he did that in this game. He had the one that rimmed out, and he ended up getting the 3-pointer later on the possession. But I thought just a really strong stint for Rob Dillingham. And he made the case to be part of this rotation moving forward. And I don't know, when Mike Conley's back, I don't know whose expense that's at. Right? Like, you're not going to truly shrink Nickeil Alexander-Walker's minutes. It's probably Mike Conley ultimately. And it could be, Jaden gets into foul trouble. That means you get more Alexander Walker, which means that, he gets bumped up to play a little bit more 3, and you play a little bit smaller, and you get Dillingham in there in the backcourt with Conley or with DiVincenzo. Like, there's going to be minutes for him. This game should prove to Chris Finch, hey, I can put him out there and feel pretty good about it. And by the way, I've been an advocate for Chris Finch handling this the way he has. I don't think Dillingham should just automatically get minutes. I thought he would before they traded for Dante DiVincenzo. I talked about this on Friday's show. We don't know if he had put Rob Dillingham out there on opening night to play 16 minutes. Would it have gone this well? We don't know. Right? Like, I mean, this is a risky comparison, I guess. But, like, think about, and obviously not apples to apples for a lot of reasons, but, like, think about the Packers. Think about the Green Bay Packers. If they put Aaron Rodgers out there in year 1, would he have been Aaron Rodgers? If they had put Jordan Love out there in year 1 and traded Aaron Rodgers after he was mad that they drafted Jordan Love, would he have been as good as he is now? We don't know. We'll never know. And it's obviously different. We're talking multiple years. It's a different sport. It's a different position. I get it. But my point is, if you put Rob Dillingham out there 6 weeks ago, is he the same player he is now? Or has he picked up a lot more by watching, by practicing, by film, etc.? We don't know, but it's worth thinking about. I don't think that him playing this well in this game means Chris Finch is an idiot for not playing him earlier, right? All right, let's close by talking individual studs and duds. We'll set up the rest of the week. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets. If you win, the FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. Obviously, a big Sunday of football. A lot of stuff going on in the NFL on Sunday. A lot of fun games, especially in that noon window. The Vikings obviously coming away with the big win. A lot of fun ones. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, NBA or NFL or anything else, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Monday Night Football, the Chargers are at home to take on the Ravens. The Ravens are 2.5-point favorites on the road to LA. That's actually, I think that's going to be a really good game. Obviously, the Harbaugh Bowl with the brothers coaching their respective teams. I don't mind Ravens -2.5. I think they win that game by a touchdown. I would take Ravens -2.5 in that game. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You can get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Today's episode is also brought to us by our friends at Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. No matter what live events you like to attend, you can find your tickets at Game Time. They'll curate your picks for you to make it even easier to save on live sports, concerts, no matter what kind of music you like to attend concerts for. They've got that, comedy shows, theater, etc. You can also toggle on the all-in pricing feature to allow you to see your total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Also, get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. With their seat views and their lowest price guarantee means that Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you think you find a better price somewhere else. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, let's close this thing out by talking about individual studs and duds. We already talked quite a bit about Dillingham. I haven't spent much time on Ant yet. I talked a little bit about Rudy. I thought Ant played really well in this game. There were moments in the middle when the Wolves were kind of, backsliding. They got down by as many as 19. The lead was kind of back between 12 and 15 and 16 and 14. And I thought Ant could have been a little bit more assertive. And then there were moments early where I thought he was like, hey, I'm going to go blow for blow with Jaylen Brown and I'm going to carry the team. It's still kind of that balance that he's got to find. And a lot of times he's not, it's the case all the time for star players. It's hard to find that balance in the heat of battle. But I thought Ant overall played well in this game. 28 points on 9 of 21, 6 of 11 on threes. He didn't shoot a whole lot of threes until the Wolves were kind of trying to get back into this thing. He was only 3 of 10 on twos. Again, I thought he was, and I need to maybe dig into the shot chart a little bit. The last couple games or a couple times within the last week, it feels like he's been a bit more on that kind of elbows, tough turnaround jumper type, almost Julius Randle range jumpers. And he was a bit more efficient when he was, ramming threes, right? Like, what did I say coming into the year in the preview? I said the Anthony Edwards player preview was take 2 of those mid-range shots, make one of them a 3, one of them at the rim, and he's going to score about 30 a game with efficiency this year. Well, he's close to that. The rim attempts, of course, are way down. So are the free throw attempts. We'll talk more about that here probably later this week. But overall, a good game for Ant. And he was a big part of the team getting back into it. Unselfish on the last play. I thought maybe he could have squeezed the trigger to try and score at the rim or get fouled. But the right basketball play, I think, 28 points, 9 rebounds, second on the team in rebounding, which, by the way, the Celtics shoot so many threes that clearly the Wolves talked a little bit about cleaning up those intermediate rebounds, right? Not you get a lot of long rebounds when you're shooting a lot of threes, but there's also those intermediate ones where the ball bounces to basically the elbows, and that free throw line extended. And the Wolves guards did a good job of cleaning those up, and especially Ant. He had 9 rebounds in this game. McDaniels had 5. Alexander Walker only had 1 rebound in this game. DiVincenzo only had 3. And Conley, by the way, is usually pretty good at that. So it hurt not having him. But again, Wolves are still up plus 9 on the glass, and Boston only had 8 offensive rebounds. But I thought Ant was good overall. 28 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists, only 3 turnovers for Anthony Edwards. Had the ball in his hands a lot, played 39 minutes. It was a big performance from him to kind of keep the Wolves or help the Wolves get back into shouting distance toward the end of the game. Rudy Gobert, another stud for this game. 10 points, 4 of 5 shooting, 20 rebounds. He was everywhere. He had 8 offensive rebounds in this game. 8 of the Wolves' 11 offensive rebounds were from Rudy Gobert. And he truly was everywhere. Like, the effort level was clearly higher for Rudy. Yes, it's got to be there more frequently. But we've seen a handful of these games this year where Rudy's been like one of the best 2 or 3 players on the floor, period, for either team. And this was one of those. No turnovers for Rudy. Barely had the ball in this game. 10 rebounds, knocked out a couple more free throws on just 2 attempts. Perfect at the line. Only 2 fouls committed. I thought he played very well in this game. It was, probably the Wolves, like start to finish, their best player on the floor. I thought he had a big impact on the paint. It's a team he's got to have a big impact on. But Boston only having 30 points in the paint is nice. And the Wolves out rebounding them by 9 is good as well. Third stud for me in this game, it's got to be Rob Dillingham. I really think it is. 14 points on 10 shots, 2 of 4 outside the arc. I know he only played 16 minutes, but his burst is really what got them to being back in this thing in the fourth quarter. Kudos to Rob Dillingham for a strong game. I should acknowledge Julius Randle. I thought Julius played fine. This was maybe the first time this year. I almost could have led the show with this, frankly, and maybe I'll talk a bit more about it on tomorrow's show. This might have been the first game this year, just off the top of my head, where I felt like Julius Randle played well, but it was the classic. It was exactly what I expected when the Wolves traded for Julius Randle. It's what I expected to see night in and night out, and the Wolves lost, which is 23 points on, 15 shots, which is good efficiency. He missed 5 free throws. He did have 6 rebounds. He did also only have 2 assists and no turnovers. So I guess the box score line doesn't really reflect that, but he had the second worst plus minus on the team. He struggled defensively mightily, and 6 boards is fine, but he played 36 minutes, second on the team in minutes, and he was third in rebounding. He's got to have more than 6 rebounds, right? He's got to have more than 2 assists, and he's got to show better effort defensively, which is the biggest thing. And also, by the way, the offensive ball movement, the ball was a bit too sticky. And he was the primary, like he had far more moments in this game where it felt like he was ISOing than Anthony Edwards. Sorry, ISOing inappropriately, if you will. Like he was the ball stopper. It felt like more often than it was Anthony Edwards in this game. And I know Ant attempted 6 more shots, but he also had 5 more assists. And he also scored 5 more points. He was also just more efficient overall because the volume and level of makes of the 3-point shot. I just thought this was a decent but disappointing Julius Randle performance. And he's got the offensive thing. Like when Ant was off the floor, I thought Julius needed to be better. I think that still needs to get cleaned up and be a little bit more efficient for Minnesota. He's not a dud. Like he played okay. It's just it's still a little clunky. Duds for me in this game. Unfortunately, Naz Reid. I thought Naz had a shot at the end. It's not because he missed a shot at the end of the game, but he had 5 points on 9 shots, 1 of 6 on threes. Had one nice drive where he was like, all right, look, I just got to score. And then he made a 3 after that, and then he missed a couple more, including the one at the buzzer. 5 rebounds in 26 minutes. A couple assists, also 2 turnovers. I just think Naz, they just need more from Naz. With no Mike Conley, ball movement's not as much there. Naz has to play a little bit more confidently, and I know it's a chicken or the egg situation. Hopefully he gets back on track, back at target center. Nickeil, I thought, was really good defensively. Only 1 of 7 shooting, 0 of 4 on threes, but I thought he brought it defensively. He also had 4 assists and no turnovers. So not a dud performance from Nickeil. All right. That's all I got for you today. Next up, the Timberwolves have the Rockets tomorrow night. It is an NBA Cup game. The first one we'll have at Target Center this year. And the Wolves take on, it's a 7 p.m. tip against the Rockets. Actually, I'm going to be recording a crossover episode with Jackson Gatlin of Locked On Rockets. And we haven't seen the Rockets yet this year. And I feel like I'll have to go back and look at last year's games, but I feel like they saw the Rockets at some weird times. Of course, they had the Şengün injury toward the end of the year. Houston's there's a lot of upside there with the Rockets. So we'll talk to Jackson on Tuesday's show. So that'll be a fun one. Look forward to that. And then Wolves Kings on Wednesday night, is that also a cup game? No, Friday's a cup game. Tuesday, Friday. So Wednesday against the Kings, not a cup game. Friday against the Clippers is a cup game. So big week ahead here, Thanksgiving week. Thankfully, it's a 4-game homestand for Minnesota. Here's hoping it's just what the doctor ordered here after a couple tough losses on the road. And now 5 losses in the last 7 games for the Wolves. So, all right, that's all we got for you today here on the show. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. A reminder about the Locked On Wolves newsletter. You can sign up on LockedOnDaily.com. It's your one-stop for ultimate team and league coverage. Delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now. LockedOnDaily.com. Locked On Wolves is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.